Joining us.
Good morning. So I'm one of the two Stacys you'll hear from today. Thank you. Early morning humor. I'm honored to be here today. I'm honored to stand with GMA for, I think, my 9th year, because I understand the importance of local government. But more importantly, I understand the values that are rooted in the state of Georgia. I've lived here for almost 30 years. I grew up in Mississippi, but I graduated from high school in Decatur. I went to college at Spelman in Atlanta. I started a small business about 5 years ago that's helped move capital to small businesses across the state. And I've spent my time at the capital of Georgia fighting for our communities. But where I grew up in Mississippi, we were what my mother referred to as the genteel poor. We had no money, but we watched PBS and we read books. And my parents struggled. My mom and dad both went to college, they both worked full time, and still they struggled to make ends meet. They had to fight to make sure we were in the right schools. We lived on the poor street on the middle class side of town so we could get zoned into the good school. Back then there wasn't Google Maps, so we had to just do magic cartography. But what my parents understood was that there was promise available, that there were opportunities available. And in 1989, they moved our family from Mississippi to Georgia to pursue that promise. My parents went to Emory University to become United Methodist ministers, and I graduated from high school in DeKalb County. But what I remember about coming to Georgia was that things were still tough. We still struggled, but that struggle was different. Because even though we didn't have a car, we had access to MARTA. And even though we didn't have health insurance, if one of my siblings got sick, we could go to Grady. Georgia has challenges, but Georgia also has opportunity. And that's why when it came time for me to pick my permanent home, I very easily chose Georgia. And I'm standing here today because I know the Georgia we can be is a stronger, brighter, bolder Georgia that serves everyone. When I think about the work that I've done in this state, when I came back to Georgia, I remember thinking about the cities, because my first job in government was at the city of Atlanta. As a college student, I worked for the Office of Youth Services. I'd gotten into a fight with Mayor Maynard Jackson when I was a freshman in college. He won the fight, but he gave me a job. And I got to work on issues of youth violence prevention. I went off to graduate school and law school, and I came back as a private attorney. But my job as a private attorney included learning about public finance. And I began what my mom calls my trajectory of downward economic mobility when I quit that private sector job to go and work for the city of Atlanta as deputy city attorney. And it is in that job and in that role that I learned about the importance of local government. I learned about tax remittances and trying to fight with the state of Georgia to get your money. I learned about the infrastructure funding when you try to figure out if you're on a state road or a county road or if the city's responsible. I learned about the issues facing local governments trying to deal with human services because the money goes to the county, but the poverty seems to be concentrated in our cities. And I learned about the importance of having a good conversation with your counties when you're dealing with the service delivery agreement. And so when I ran for office in 2006, I didn't run for office. I ran for our local governments. I ran for our families because our families are best served by the government that is closest to them, by our municipal governments. And I ran because I knew that there were too many people in office who'd never had to implement a single law that they passed. And so I stand here today as someone who is committed to lifting up our local governments, to lifting up our communities. And I'm someone who comes with a proven track record, because it's not enough to say you stand with someone if you can't prove that you've done it. And that's why I am proud of the work that I've done for our local government. I'm proud to have won the Champion for Georgia Cities award from the GMA. I'm proud of the fact that I fought to retain access to broadband and telecom by fighting in 2012 to stop the prohibition for municipal broadband in the state of Georgia. I'm proud that I've fought year after year to allow local governments to keep their information on property tax bills so they can collect the monies due to make sure the governments can run. But I'm also proud of the work I've done fighting for health care, fighting for Medicaid expansion so that we can treat our mentally ill and get them out of our jails and into the help they need. And as the next governor of Georgia, I'm going to fight to expand access to Medicaid. I'm going to fight to make certain that transportation and transit is not just a conversation for Atlanta, but a conversation for the state. Because it's just as much about Junction City families being able to get to a grocery store down in Columbus because they need to take transit as it is about getting around on MARTA. From Abbeville to Zebulon, we have to have a governor who believes in our cities, and that's what I will do. I've introduced plans to talk about how I will lead the state. I've talked about advanced energy jobs, which we know are helping transform communities in Camilla and Tybee Island, making certain that we can create 25,000 to 45,000 new jobs for Georgians. I've pushed for an economic mobility plan to make certain that our families are earning and growing and being protected, because economic mobility is an issue that is trapping so many of our communities. And I've put forward a bold plan for youth and children, because if we don't take care of our kids from the moment they arrive, how can we help them thrive? I'm excited about the opportunity to run for governor because I know what it means to lead. I know what it means to want, but I also know what it means to have success in your forward vision. Georgia is an extraordinary state, a state where prosperity is possible, a state where workers and businesses can work together, not in competition. I'm proud of the fact that I've won both the Georgia Chamber of Commerce A rating and the Friend of Labor Award for the same work in the same year. Somebody was confused, but both of them liked it. And so I stand here as someone who has brought together communities. As minority leader, it was my job to knit together communities across the state, from representation who thought that they were urban or rural, suburban, or didn't really know where they fit, but knew they needed representation. And even though I led as a state legislator from Kirkwood, I understood that I also had to think about communities across the state, from Ludowici all the way to DeSoto. My job is to stand with cities, to stand with community, to stand with our families. And I intend to be the next governor of Georgia because I know that we have a diversity in our state that is our strength, a diversity in our state that is our gold star. And together we can transform the state of Georgia so that no matter where you live, no matter what your zip code, you never have to worry if Georgia is looking out for you because we'll be in this work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments. Mr. Bluestein, your first question.
Every year, lawmakers propose bills that seem to challenge home rule, whether they be plastic bag bans or new restrictions on certain businesses. How would you vet these types of proposals if they make it to your desk as governor?
I believe the first responsibility is to actually stand up as governor and say that we believe in home rule. As the state legislator, both as leader and before I became leader, I have fought consistently to preserve home rule. I fought against that plastic bag ban and worked together to bring a coalition that could kill that bill. I worked to fight against restrictions on home rule, but also to provide more transparency for local governments. Because home rule is not just about what the state legislature tries to oversee, it's also about what it tries to stop local governments from being able to do. One of the challenges I've seen is in our tax process. Transparency is an issue of home rule. Because how can you make decisions for your community when the state is telling you how much money you can have and how you can collect it and how you can spend it? And so as the governor, I think it's important to set the principles under which we will operate. And for me, that first principle is that the government closest to the people is best. And as governor, I will not only fight for home rule, I will make certain that the bills that make it to my desk respect the principle of home rule.
You've called for significant changes to Stone Mountain, a state-owned memorial. When it comes to Civil War monuments, how do you balance the wishes of local governments with state law that now prevents many from taking action?
Sure. So as I said, I grew up in Mississippi. I grew up in a state that still flies the Confederate flag as its state flag. I grew up in a community where when I was in elementary school, we were compelled to go and visit Beauvoir, the last home of Jefferson Davis. Imagine being a 7 or 8-year-old who has to stand in front of the graves of slaves and be told to celebrate the man who put them there. I hold the conversation of the Confederacy and its veneration to be a very personal one. And in the context of the conversation about Confederate monuments, I bring to it a very specific understanding of what that meant to my family, what it meant to me, to see people tell me I was less than because of the color of my skin. And to know that these communities, not in the wake of the war, but years later, to terrorize communities of color and Jewish communities, started putting up statuary, not in celebration or not in commemoration, but in celebration. And that's deeply problematic to me. If you remember the context of my comments on Stone Mountain, they happened in the wake of the President of the United States saying that there were bad folks on both sides, equivocating about racism, equivocating about domestic terrorism. And when asked the question, do I believe that we should celebrate domestic terrorism in the United States and in the state of Georgia, my answer is an unequivocal no. My leadership at the Capitol demonstrates that I have strong principles about what I believe, but I think that we have to work together to solve those problems. But people need to know where you want to go in order to follow, and that's why I was very unequivocal about the fact that I think we have to address Confederate monuments in the state of Georgia.
Thank you for those comments. We'll wait for the clock to reset, and then you'll have 2 minutes to give us your closing remarks.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to Mr. Bluestein, thank you to GMA, thank you to Larry Hansen, the new executive director. But I also want to take a moment and thank the mayors and the city council members, the city managers, the people who have stood up for our communities across the state in good times and bad. I came into the legislature in 2007 at the tail end of one recession, heading into another one. And I've watched local governments struggle to meet the needs of their communities day in and day out, sometimes with less money, but always with a mission and a heart for good. The state of Georgia faces really important challenges. We have a high poverty rate, we have an unemployment rate that's going down, but folks are not seeing their salaries go up. We have communities, especially rural communities, that are struggling to maintain their hospitals, to provide for their families, and to get out of the debt that has been in place for so long. But I know that working together, the state of Georgia has an extraordinary opportunity. And the reason I'm running for governor this year is because I have the proven experience, the track record, and the vision to make better possible. We have to have a governor who believes in every Georgian, who looks around and doesn't see problems, but sees opportunities for solutions. I've been a tax attorney, a small business owner, an effective civic leader, and I've served in the state legislature for 11 years, 7 of which I served as minority leader. And in my time as minority leader, I was proudest of the moments where I stood together with people from across the aisle and across the state with a single common vision to make Georgia greater. And I look forward to doing that as your next governor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.